like to introduce our guest speaker for the evening. I'm going to hand it over to Amanda and let her take it from here.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Amanda Darkangelo. I'm a senior consultant at CTI Data, which is a boutique data consulting firm. I'm also a co-founder for the community group Salt City Data Community. We do speaker sessions, we do workshops, trainings, all that kind of stuff. So I am very entrenched in data, both in my professional life and in my hobbies. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the data industry, what it means to actually work in data, and give an overview of the different types of things that you can do if you choose to follow a data-based career.
Okay. We can probably keep going straight.
Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes. You are perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so welcome to data. So first I want to talk a little bit about why data. So there's a couple of really interesting things about data that have drawn me to the career path I'm at really from the start. And so a couple of those are, data is an agnostic industry. So when you go into data, you can go into finance, you can go into e-commerce, you can go into operations, machining, supply chain. Really, you can do data at any organization, really at all today. All organizations have gotten to the point where they're implementing data solutions. And so data professionals are needed no matter what type of organization it is. So you can, if you have a particular interest in, skateboarding, skateboard companies are going to need data professionals to analyze their sales, to understand their customer base, to find demographics and do marketing. And so no matter what you're interested in, data is going to be there. There's a couple things to keep in mind when you talk about the data industry. So the first is qualitative versus quantitative data. So there is such a thing as qualitative data. So these are not necessarily demographics, but stories from people. So you're collecting anecdotes effectively. And one of my favorite quotes is that the plural of anecdote is not data. So what that means is, by collecting a series of anecdotes, you're not actually achieving a analytical data set, but what you're doing is adding flavor to your quantitative data. And then your quantitative data turns those stories into numbers. So having both balance each other out is extremely important to make sure that the story you're telling with data aligns with the story that's being told within the community that you're analyzing. Next, inherent biases. We all have inherent biases. We can fight them, but they're always going to be there. They're how you grew up, they're, your culture and your personality. But we can fight those inherent biases by continuing to ask the question each time you do an analysis, is this really what the data is telling me? Because data can tell whatever story, the person analyzing that data wants to tell. So as data professionals, we have to be very stringent about our desire to find truth and not our desire to support the theory that we've already decided is right. And that's how you combat the inherent biases that you hold personally, or the biases that may show in the data, the biases that maybe your organization holds. You just want to delve into the truth and not necessarily support any theory ahead of time. So piggybacking on that, we want to use the null hypothesis method when we use data. And what the null hypothesis method means is that you go into any analysis in an experimental fashion. So you have a theory, excuse me. You have a theory, and then based on that theory, your null hypothesis is the antithesis of that theory. So, for example, we have a theory that ice cream sales impact crime rates. So that's your theory. Then your null hypothesis is ice cream sales do not affect crime rates. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. So I put some discussion questions here. We may not get to them. We can come back if we have some time at the end. But just keep in mind as we go through this presentation, like what kind of use cases would you see for this? In what instances could data use prove problematic? And how would you communicate the need for data in the world? So areas of data. We call the areas of data as a collective the data governance or data fabric. So data fabric is the weaving together of all the different pieces of the data industry and identifying that across all of those pieces and implementing at an organization. So your data fabric holds together that structure and basis for all of your data functionality within your organization. So it's a holistic structure for implementation of data within an organization. This includes technology, hardware, and people. So you're working across the spectrum of technology and individuals who are using that technology. And having all of these pieces is key in creating a comprehensive data solution. Each one of them supports the other pieces across the system. So these are the areas of data: architecture, modeling, storage, security, documentation, data warehousing and business intelligence, integration management, quality, and references or metadata. I don't want to get into too much of these because that can take very long, but I'll touch on each a little bit. So data architecture is the design of the physical and virtual infrastructure by which data is supported. So this is are you using Azure or AWS, or are you using a star schema or a universal schema? Modeling is the manipulation of data using algorithms to solve problems. And what that means is you're actually playing with the data. You're manipulating it in some way to address a use case, address the ultimate issue that is that was initially identified to do the analysis on this data. Storage and operations is how you functionally maintain the data. So there's a ton of different storage options. You can be in the cloud, you can be on-prem, you can be operating in virtual machines, you can be operating in containers like Docker containers. So there's all sorts of things that you can do around storage and operations. Security, obviously, data requires significant security, especially when you're working with PII, which is personally identifiable information. When someone can be identified within the data set, information that should not be public. For example, credit card information or people's social security numbers. As a data professional, you come into contact with those on a regular basis, but that is data that should not be available to others within your organization or the public. So you have to use security processes to make sure that those people's data is secure. Documentation and content. I like to say that documentation saves lives, particularly my life and my sanity. So when you're using data, you want to make sure to document everything. That saves you from having to explain something over and over again. You can just point people towards the documentation. It's available. They can read it and ask you any questions they have. Data warehousing and business intelligence. This is the restructuring and analysis of data for decision making. So data warehousing is the curating of information into a single location that's much more user friendly, much more easily visualized than the generic database that you may be structuring this off of, or the variety of databases. With data, you can connect to a database, you can connect to an application using an API, you could connect to different streaming systems like IoT devices and edge computing devices, and then that data all gets consolidated within a data warehouse. BI, on the other hand, is the visualization or the reporting, however you're telling the story with that data to end users. So if you're presenting to a C-suite that are really interested in high-level decision-making, you may have a really simple dashboard that just has the couple of metrics that they need. If you're building a report for daily operations, you may have a report and a much more detailed dashboard that goes into all of the questions that they need to answer on any given day. So BI is very curated for the end user of that particular question or use case. Integration management. So this is the connection between data sources, especially through data factories. Data factories are operations that migrate data from one place to another. Migration can be used in a number of ways. You can do migration through Python, you can do migration through Java, you can do migration through ADF, which is Azure's data solution. You can do migration with AWS. You can do migration with Kafka, which is a event streaming integration solution. So designing all of that and making sure those connections work properly and when they need to is integration management. Data quality. This is mostly around data cleaning and validation. So ensuring that your data is actually right. It's telling you the right thing. If you're trying to get a count of the number of people who enter a room, you need to validate that that data is correct. So it's one of the most integral and time-consuming steps. I like to say that data is 90% data cleaning. So it can be fairly tedious, but it's really important to your end product. Finally, references and metadata. Descriptive data associated with each column within a data set, as well as the overall data set itself. So this is like a schema definition or a metric definition. Each column within a data set may have an associated definition of that column's metric. And so that can be embedded directly into the data set itself. The schema definition tells you exactly how that data set is laid out. It tells you how many columns there are, how much data is in each column, what data types each column are. So it gives you a lot of information about the way that you're developing your data. And then references are different pieces of documentation, like a lineage map. And a lineage map tells you this data started at this application, it went through an API, it landed in this data warehouse, and finally it was output through this dashboard. So that's a reference material that's very important when associating two data sets. So I want to kind of get your thoughts on the data aspects that we just discussed. So which, if any, of these areas of data science do you think is most appealing? Which do you relate to?
I also want to just chime in there of if you guys are feeling anything like data oriented in your capstone, now is a perfect time to like run that by Amanda and start talking through, what data you're trying to incorporate or what data you're struggling to get, and how, how you can incorporate that into your capstone as well.
Yeah, I do see that we're at 5:50, so I want to make sure that there's plenty of time for questions. I do have a few additional slides. If no one has anything, I can keep going, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the data industry so far, or how you might plan to incorporate data into your capstones.
I'm doing I'm doing something that reorganizes your list based on the IO that the product is in. And right now I just have printouts from the store or where stuff is generically, but I don't have access to their APIs. I wanted to be able, whatever store you were at that I had the information for to switch between those stores.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting use case because you could build a proof of concept around manually entering data and show that as the leverage to get you access to APIs. So you're going to need a lot of data for this. You can take the store map data that you already have, manually input it into some tables that indicate like position 1, position 2, position 3, and you can parse out or categorize departments like that, and then you can assign them a name. So department 1 may be produce, or you can even get more detailed than that and say like department 1 is leafy greens, and then you do that for all of the products, and then the items on the list would then join to this table, and you would be able to say like this product is in department 1 because you're looking for spinach. So you have a generic list of products that may be on someone's grocery list, and this is a list that's going to grow over time, but you have a generic list of products. Someone puts in a list that has spinach on it. You pull from your generic list of products spinach, And from there, you can see, spinach is in the leafy greens department. That is at location 1.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
You can also chime in for any job questions as well in terms of where you guys are thinking you're heading and maybe job title information or job descriptions or wherever you guys want to take the conversation is completely fine.
I was just curious, I don't know how long of a discussion it is, but data cleaning, how does that work? Like the example you gave of data saying how many people entered a room. So is it monitoring that data live? Is it like redundant checking? How does data cleaning work?
Yeah, so there's 2 aspects of this. There's data cleaning and data validation. So cleaning is sanity checking your data effectively. So if you have manually input text strings, you want to go through and make sure that the spelling is correct. If you have locations and people are they're not standardized. So people are putting Park Street and they're saying Park STR period, Park ST period, Park Street spelled out. You want to go through and standardize those so you can categorize based on that location. Whereas data validation, so going back to the example that that I brought up before, so with this use case, you would have a people counter, which there's one in Syracuse in development. It's called Density, and it's literally just a device that counts how many people walk by it. So you know how many people are in a room at a given time. This was big during COVID. But what you could do to ensure that that device is working properly is that manual reporting. So go to the spot that the device is in, sit there for 2 hours, count people who come in, go back to your database, make sure that that aligns, go back, do it next week, and then maybe after 3 or 4 times doing it, you say this data is validated.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, I have a question about that. So that's like, okay, I'll come back to that because I don't know, that's a little confusing. Not confusing, but so that's a way to validate your own data, you're saying, like to go to that area and count.
Yeah, definitely. So you can validate your data by going and manually validating it. You can also validate data by looking at different sources that are publicly available. So for example, number of crimes in the US is tracked by the US government, but it's also tracked by a number of third-party non-governmental institutions. So what you can do is use the US data as your central source of truth, and then bring in data from these other locations, compare it to the US government data, and say, like, this is X standard deviations away from what these external third parties say it is. That raises a red flag because we have 3 different validation points who say, the first 6 months of 2022 have had 2,000 murders, and the internal source says it's 500. So that raises a red flag. You can also validate data by running surveys. So if you're getting survey data, you can validate that data by running your survey 2 or 3 times. So you're getting larger sample populations and you're getting a mix of sample populations over time. And so that validates your data and allows you to ensure that the data you're collecting wasn't an outlier.
Hi, this is Shantina. I do like the idea of gathering a lot of information and being able to put it back out where it's presentable and legible and understandable by, somebody who doesn't understand such large amounts of data or things and the way that it's first collected as well.
Christy, I see you have your hand up.
My project is centered around, I wanted to try to use the city of Syracuse data about bike lanes and the safety. Some are labeled as excellent, some are not. And so I'm trying to think about ways of pulling in data about the particular routes. I guess I don't have a question formed, but I know that there's data available and I need to pull it in.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Like you're effectively trying to validate what the city of Syracuse has said is an excellent bike route. So they have their own algorithm for identifying, this has bike lanes and it's whatever, the lane width wide, and it only sees this many cars on average. So, so they have their own thing, but you want to come in with a number of variables that you think indicate safety for bikers. So what you can do is, look at the speed limit on those sites, which I think is a New York State data set. I think, if not, I think you can get it from Google Maps. So you can do that. You can, I believe there are data sets that indicate, I know that there's lat long of where vehicle accidents happen. So if there's been accidents on that route, you can check the neighborhood it's in. We have a number of neighborhoods throughout the city of Syracuse. There may be some correlation of potential accidents in, say, downtown as opposed to Eastwood, because there's a lot of traffic in downtown. So you can look at like population density maybe. Yeah, so you just want to come up with this list of variables that you think could be impacting a biker's safety at any point, and then pull all the data together as much as you can and create your own score and say like, well, the city of Syracuse says it's this, but I say it's this because its speed limit is 45, it's a 3-lane highway, the bike lane is brand new, stuff like that.
Okay, that's some good, I wrote it down. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions for Amanda? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Amanda, and coming in. If there are any questions that pop up, or is there a good way to get in contact with you?
Yes, I will put in the chat both my email address and I will try to pull up my LinkedIn. So my email address is.
I thought you have more slides. You have more slides to tell us about?
I do. This was supposed to be a session that went till 6. I don't want to take up everyone's time.
Okay.
But I would be happy to come in for another session if there are empty sessions open and people are interested in any additional details about data.
Perfect. We're actually going to send out a survey about guest speakers this week. And so we'll definitely collect student interest on having you back, and kind of more of a guided topic maybe in terms of what data sets we're working with, or what students are trying to accomplish with their capstones. But in the meantime, Amanda just put her email in the Zoom chat. So if you guys have any questions or are wrestling with some data, maybe for your capstone, or struggling to, collect that, Amanda would be a great person to reach out to for extra help on that.
Absolutely. So feel free to reach out with any questions. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and yeah, anything about data, I'm here to help.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. So we are going to kick it off the way we always do. What did we learn last week?
How to go through arrays, which I need a refresher on.
Arrays are not going anywhere. We're going to get lots of practice with them tonight. What else did we learn?
To create
I have a question.
operator in HTML.
Yep. We did an intro to kind of HTML. This week, I decided to shuffle things around a little bit. So I was initially going to do JavaScript part 1 and part 2 kind of back to back, and then do vanilla JavaScript web applications, and then hand you over to Ryan. And Ryan's going to start talking about APIs and how to pull data in and make your app talk to other servers and things on the internet. But what I realized was we can't really get practice with this basic intro to JavaScript that we've been teaching without being able to practice that in the browser, right? So I swapped JavaScript part 2 with the intro to vanilla JavaScript web applications. So what we're going to do coming up is we're going to build a movie theater seat selection app. And that's going to give you more practice with arrays. It's going to give you more practice with objects. It's going to give you more practice with using the HTML DOM and getting things from your JavaScript to your HTML, or your HTML to your JavaScript. It's going to get you lots of practice with all of the concepts from last week. And one thing that we're going to do today is break it down to the level of saying step by step, before we do anything, let's write out in English what we're trying to do. And we're going to go over to our code and we're going to do it. And then you guys are going to give me a speeding ticket when you go back and you read the sentence and you go, well, I understand what that said in English, and I understand what that code is over there, but the two aren't connecting, right? Where things aren't meeting in the middle. So that's going to be the approach for the next at least 2 days, is working on this movie theater app, going through and actually writing out step by step what we're doing before we even do it in the code. But I'm going to stop there. Someone had a question.
I just want to know, where were you on Sunday, Max?
So I am so sorry. I am so in calendar mode from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. like Monday through Friday, that when the weekend rolls around, like I completely forgot about office hours. So I am so sorry about that. And I have more bad news because I'm driving up to Syracuse on Thursday, I will actually be out of class on Thursday. Latonia, who is one of the cohort 2 graduates, is going to come in and teach an entire class that's hopefully going to be a review. And I'm hoping that her class is going to be kind of a jump start to your capstones, right? So talking about how to set up a project, reviewing HTML basics, getting GitHub set up and reviewing what Nathan did with repositories, right? Making sure that everything is talking together, right? Just getting into that mindset of, all right, if I'm starting a project from scratch, what are all the project setup things that I need to do? So Latonia is going to come in and be a guest teacher on Thursday. And then I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do office hours. I'm not sure what my Sunday is going to look like yet. So I will probably have more details for you later this week on what office hours will be. I hate to leave you 2 weeks without them, but I am going to try and fit them in maybe Saturday night or sometime on Sunday, but I will keep you in touch on that one. I'm so sorry for missing you guys on Sunday. Hopefully you had a good session amongst yourselves. But I apologize because I just was not in calendar mode and forgot to set myself a reminder.
Me and Doug had a great conversation.
Awesome.
I thought it was recorded. I was like, is this recording us?
It was recorded. I'm gonna watch the recording before I post it blindly to YouTube. So if you guys would prefer me not to post it, that's also completely fine. But again, apologies in advance for not being there.
I'm gonna say no.
Yeah, I'm fine with it fading away into.
Yeah, we were just, he helped me
think,
figure something out. But
Okay.
it
I have
was
a
fine.
question
Coming on. Man.
for Christy. Did he help you like with your domain stuff? Because if you do, I have a Google domain. I need help. So do y'all want to
So,
have that conversation
maybe-
again with me or?
So, I talked to Nate. So with my domain, I was doing everything right, except I just decided that when I put the GitHub address in to Namecheap, that I just added I added another part to it that didn't belong. And so it was very simple. But I think when Thursday, when we have, I mean, I can help you before then, but I was thinking since LaTonya is coming back on Thursday, maybe we can make that something that we, like a
Talk about.
definitive topic, to review, because it's as easy as it was when Nate was helping us, but you know, when you're left to your own devices, you start overthinking and adding stuff that doesn't belong. So
Right. All right. Thank you.
okay.
And feel free to schedule one-on-ones with me. And I'm not sure if Nate has a Calendly link set up, but he is in our Slack. So if you're having any problems and you said, hey, can I grab 15 minutes with you or 30 minutes with you? I'm stuck on this one thing. I'm sure Nate would be happy to help you out with that as well. So feel free, just because Nate is like done teaching does not mean, I should say Nathan, sorry. I work with a Nate and I think Nathan prefers Nathan. So apologies there. But Nathan is coming back for DevOps Part 2, where we're doing full stack deploys and databases and all of that fun stuff. But I'm sure he would be happy to hear from you guys on Slack if you want to reach out for help.
Yeah, I sent him a message and he got right back to me. And like I said, it was very simple. It was nothing. So I think like Max said, he definitely is helpful. He'll get right back to you.
Awesome. Anything else lingering from last week? Any concepts? I know Larry said he wanted a little bit more practice with arrays. Anything from last week that you guys would like to touch on, or anything that needs to be recovered, anything like that?
I have a question, and my apologies, Max, if we haven't actually gone over it yet. I just happened to be reading it in that JavaScript like book thing.
Yep.
And I'm getting the concepts. Like I can understand the objects, the numbers, all of that. I really cannot, for some reason, grasp that concept of the remainder part. I don't understand it. I've like read it over and over. I swear to God, like 5 times, and I can't get it.
That is not a problem. We can do a quick demo on that. So you're talking about the modulus operator, I'm guessing,
Yes.
which is the % sign.
Yeah.
So let me just share my screen, and we're just going to create, I'm just going to say file, new file, and save this to my downloads as mod.js. And so let me just cd to my downloads here. And so if we take 2 numbers, right, and I just do a console log and I say 5 divided by 2, right? We know that 5 divided by 2 is going to go in 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. And then there's going to be something left over, right? So if I do my node mod.js and remember to save it, it prints out 2.5. Okay, well, that makes sense, right? That's just division. But what if we want to know how many times does 2 go into 2 and have something left over, right? So what is 4 divided by 2 is 2, but we're going to have 1 left over from that division, right? So basically, if we do the modulus 1 or the modulus 2 here, that is going to say 1. because 2 goes into 5 2 times with 1 left over. And that's what this modulus is doing, is it's saying how many is left over after you do the division.
Okay, so thank you, because that broke it down so much easier than when I was reading it. I could not like understand the concept based on how they were explaining it in that book.
Yeah, if you take it way back to like, I don't know, 4th grade math, when you started learning about multiplication and division, or 6th grade math, or whatever it is, you start doing out all of that math, right? And you do 5 divided by 2, and you go, all right, how many times does 2 go into 5? Oh, it goes in twice. And then you do the 5 minus 4, and you get the 1 down at the bottom, and that's your remainder. That is all the modulus is doing, is it's saying, what is the remainder after we do the division?
Okay.
And that is helpful. I feel like that's one of those things that, like, when you're teaching JavaScript from cover to cover and you need to get like all of the concepts out there, modulus is one of those things that you have to teach to make sure you're teaching everything that JavaScript can do. But at the same time, the only time I have ever used a modulus is to tell whether something was even or odd.
Okay.
So if we do 5 divided by 2 and there is 5 modulus 2 and there's a remainder, that means that the number must be odd. And if we do 6 modulus 2 and rerun it, we're going to get 0. And whenever the modulus operator returns 0, it's an even number. And so the only time I've ever needed that was like if I wanted every other table row to be gray, so it was like shaded every other one going down. That is the only time I have ever used modulus in JavaScript, is to tell whether a number was even or odd, just to do every other one.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Any other resources that you guys are finding where you're finding the light bulb moments, whether it's free code camp, whether it's something in the list that Karen shared for the books, whether it's eloquent JavaScript, whether it's me not talking for once and you guys finding the answers on your own, any other resources you guys want to share?
Let's use YouTube University.
Are you finding a particular channel that's helpful, or just searching around for your questions and kind of picking whatever has a lot of views?
A little bit of both. There's a guy called Code Stacker, but I think he leaves the E out. And he does a lot about, I think it was grid, like flex and grid maybe. I'll look at my history list and I'll come up with a list of things. So
awesome. Yeah, feel free to keep sharing resources. Feel free to share them in the C3 channel, the one that has me in it, just because I can add them to the daily outlines. So if you're finding something is particularly useful, feel free to share it with everyone, including me. And that way I can keep it in the outlines, because all of these outlines that we're using for this cohort will roll into next cohort as well. So you're not only helping out your fellow students, you're helping out future students of Careers in Code as well when you share those resources.
okay.
Awesome.
I was hoping that I could get like a little review of something too.
Sure.
So I'm stuck in free code camp on the appending the strings with the adjective.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do want to warn you guys, remember free code camp that I shared with you guys when we were doing intro to HTML? Well, there's this new responsive web design, and I clicked into this today and panicked because everything that we had just gone through 4 weeks ago changed.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, where did my free code camp go? This is what I assigned for homework, right? And it was just like, where did all my work go?
Yeah,
Well, the good news is it's not gone. If you go back to free code camp, there is something that says legacy responsive web design certification. If you pop that open, that's all of the things that we know and love and that you guys have gone through. And if you guys do finish this up and get your certification, this is something that you can put on a resume and still say that you have the certification, even though it just changed. One responsive web design certification is enough. It doesn't have to be the new or updated one. So I don't want you guys to panic if you go back to that section, because today we are going to pull it all together, right? We're going to do a little bit of HTML. We're going to do a little bit of JavaScript. We're going to do the slightest, tiniest a bit of CSS just to get over that hump. But I do want to mention that if you guys panic and you're like, where did my responsive web design go? Don't worry, it is under this legacy section. Now, with that said, Nicole, give me the name that you were stuck on again.
Appending variables to a string. Thank you.
All right, appending variables to a
Can you
string.
mute me
Yep.
again?
Okay. So says we can build a string over multiple lines out of string literals. We can also append variables to a string using the plus equals operator. So they're saying we're going to put this string called awesome in a constant, meaning it's not going to change, called add an adjective. We are then going to do a let our string and make that equal to free code camp is. And then what we're going to do is take an adjective and add it to the end of our string. So it's saying set some adjective to a string of at least 3 characters and append it using the myString plus equals operator. So this plus equals operator might be a little confusing. So I want to just show you basically what we're doing here is when we say my string plus equals some adjective, this is the exact equivalent of saying my string is now going to equal my string plus some adjective. So this plus equals is a little shorthand to accomplish this exact same thing, but just with a few less characters. So all it's doing here is it's saying, hey, make some adjective equal to at least 3 characters. So learning to code is, and we're going to say awesome. And then all we need to do is say add some adjective to the end of my string. So if we just run the tests on that, we get it passed.
Thank you. It was
No
really
problem.
late.
Any other free code camps we're stuck on? Anything we want to review before we dive into the project we'll be working on for at least the next 2 days?
Since you mentioned it,
Yeah.
JavaScript, basic JavaScript profile lookup.
Profile lookup. Okay. Oh, this is a fun one. Nested arrays and objects in nested arrays. Yay. This might be a preview of what we're about to start working on tonight. Okay, we've got an array of objects representing different people in our contact list, a lookup profile function that takes the name as the first parameter, and a property of the second parameter. As arguments has been pre-written for you, the function should check if name is in an actual contact's first name property, given as the property prop is a property of that contact. If both are true, then return the value of the property. Okay, sometimes it's easier to just dive into it and get it working. So they're saying all of our code needs to live in here, and this is our example data, and then what we're calling on it, right? So it's saying look up the profile Christian and last name. And so we should go find Christian, and based off of Christian, we are going to get the property last name, and it should return VOS. So what we're going to do here is we are going to have we worked with .find yet in Free Code Camp? Is .find familiar?
Not familiar, but I don't know if I kind of glanced over it or not.
Okay, so then we'll do it as a regular for loop, right? So we're gonna say for let contact of contacts, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna say if the contact dot first name is equal to the name that we're getting passed in here, then we want to return the contact property that is getting passed in here. So basically what we're doing is we're saying, take Akira in here, go up here and look for Akira in the first name property, right? So go through the whole thing, go through all the contacts. And as soon as we find a contact where the contact's first name matches the name that's getting passed into the property, then go ahead and return out likes from the property, from the contact itself. So I'm going to run that. And we get some check marks, right? That's working for Christian and last name. That's working for Sherlock and likes. That's working for Harry and likes. But what it's doing is down here, it's saying, well, we're looking up a name called Bob, and we don't know a Bob in our contacts. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here, and the return is special, right? The return in JavaScript is saying once it hits the return, it's going to kill the loop. Nothing's going to run after it. But that return is only going to be hit if this statement is true. So we're going to run through all of the contacts. And if we run through all the contacts and make it to the end of this for loop, we want to return a string that says no such contact. So we're going to run that, and we get everything but the last one. So the last one is saying look up profile, Akira address, and that should return no such property. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do this. We're going to say if the contact has the property, then return contact property. Otherwise, we are going to return no such property. And we got it. So let's go through that again, because this way of making our code work step by step is something that, like, this is how you're going to write code in the real world. Believe it or not, it's going to be a matter of my code has to do X, Y, and Z. Let me get it to do X, and then let me get it to do Y, and then sometimes Z comes along for the ride, right? So the general thing here, and the most important thing of this whole exercise, is what is lookup profile supposed to be doing? It's supposed to be taking in the person's first name and then returning out whatever property we are looking for in that person. But it's doing a little bit more. It's letting us know if that person doesn't exist, or if the person exists but doesn't have that property. So the first thing we do is we say, hey, we've got to find the person. The computer can't do anything in arrays unless it's doing it one at a time. So go loop over all the contacts and see if their first name matches whatever name gets passed in here. If their name does match, then we can go inside this if statement and go do more things. But if we make it all the way through all the contacts, which is this last curly brace here, and we don't find them at any point, just log out no such contact. And then we come back up here and we go, all right, well, as we're looping through each one of them, if the contact's first name matches the name that gets passed in, then check another if statement. Check to see if the contact that we have matched on has the property we're looking for. If it does, then go ahead and return out whatever is in there. If it doesn't, then go back and return no such property, because we found the person, but the data that we're looking for in that person just doesn't exist. Is that helpful, Larry?
Yes, I'm just trying to get, so it's going through, if it doesn't find the name at all of the contact, it jumps out of the for loop, and then it returns no such contact, and then it jumps out of the function itself.
Correct. Because whenever we hit a return, the return is going to end any execution and just return that value back. So
Okay.
Even if we hit this return contact prop on the second contact, we won't loop over any of the other contacts because that return ran. So as soon as the return done is run, it kills any function, any loop, anything,
Okay.
and returns the value out.
All right, so it jumps right out. All right, thank you.
I think I had trouble because at first I thought I had to put console log. So I spent so much time typing in the console log, and it wasn't required. But like sometimes like it was like complete, and I just it's fine.
Yeah, so and that's a good note, right? Of Free Code Camp, when we run the tests down here, well, normally it console logs it out, but you may find it helpful to console log as you go, right? So as you're in here and you're like, all right, I don't really understand what contact is. I need help in understanding that. You can come in here and do a console log contact and hit run the tests. And down here at the bottom, you'll see it logging out, right? So that's not to say that you can't use console logs in Free Code Camp. In fact, you should if you're stuck somewhere. If you're like, I don't really know if this for loop is running, or what is in my contact, what properties do I have access to? You can still use your console log, but it isn't going to be required to get the test to pass. Any other questions? Okie doke. So we are going to dive into what we are building tonight, which is a movie seat app. So when the page first loads, we've got Max's Movies 8, just a basic title at the top, and it says select a movie to see seating options. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick any one of these movies. And when we pick it, it's going to show us all the seats that are available. Right? And if the seat is in red, it's taken. If it's in blue, it means we selected it. And then down here, it says you have 2 seats selected for a total of $16. And when we hit the checkout button, it gives us this little alert and turns our blue seats to red because they are now occupied. And this works if I go in here and I change it, I see those seats. And then if I go back to whatever I had selected, which I don't remember what it was, my seats are still occupied, right? And so little things in here too, if you see there are different prices for different movies. So as you select your seats, you'll see that the total that appears at the bottom is based off of whatever movie you have selected. Believe it or not, this app is going to take us at least 2 days to build. And we're going to go through step by step. What we are going to do is if you go to the week 8, day 1 outline, we've got 3 important links for you here. We've got the steps, which is the document we're going to be generating as we go through all of this. You have the final code. So my final code is up on GitHub. And if you go to script.js, you can see all of the final code and how it's working. But if you come in here and read all of this JavaScript, you're going to have no idea what's going on, right? So the point of this steps document that I have linked here is every time that we go to do something new, we're going to write out what our objective is as a sentence in English, and then we're going to go do it. And when we're done with that step, before we move on to the next one, if you're reading that step in English and looking at the code and things aren't connecting, interrupt me. Go, whoa, 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 Max. Re-explain that to me. I don't get it, right? Because the important thing here is not that we get this app working at the end. It's that we understand the concepts as we're using them and why we are doing those steps. So hopefully this steps document is a good refresher for you of what order are we going. And then finally, there's a link to the little demo. So if you want to play around with this and get an idea of how it should be working, you're welcome to come in here and play around with it. Any questions on that before we get going? So we're not going to do a formal requirements document for this because hopefully the demo gives you a good idea of what we're building, but we're going to start there and go on out. Questions before we dive in?
We're doing a new folder and everything, so I got to do before you do.
You got it. We're going to jump in. We're going to go File, Open Folder. I'm going to go to my code and I'm going to make a week 8. And then I'm going to make a new folder day 1 and I'm going to pop that open. This is the only thing we're working on all day. So you don't need to do like a separate folder for movies. But we will be working over this over the course of several days, just so you guys know. So we're gonna now create 3 separate files, right? We know our index.html, we know our style.css, but now we are also going to create our script.js and get all 3 of them linked. So this is totally optional. If you guys want to follow along with me, you can. I'm going to try and go slow, but I am also documenting step by step what we are doing here, so that when you guys go through to do this for homework, which will be due on Sunday, you guys can replicate that and remember what order that we did it in. So I'm going to just shut my mouth and go to my steps document. And if you guys want to pull this up, you can. I'm just going to put it on my other monitor so we aren't juggling space. But the first thing we're going to do is create folder for project and create HTML, JS, and CSS files.
Am I the only one that can't see what you're doing?
No, I'm gonna keep that
okay.
off my screen. If you
Sorry.
pop open the movie seats app steps from the outline, which is this link right here, you'll be able to see what I'm typing. Okay, so we're gonna go VS Code. We are going to do index.html, and we're going to do our exclamation point enter and call this movies. We are then going to, whoops, did not mean to do that. We are going to save that, and we're going to do a new file, and we're going to call that style.css, and we're going to add an H1 and make the color red, and go back to our index.html. We're going to do our link href to our style.css, and the rel is going to be a style sheet. And we're going to save that. We're going to go down to the body and add in an H1 that says Max's movies. And then final step, we're going to go over to the right. We're going to add one new file, new file. We're going to call it script.js. And we're going to console log hello world. We're going to go back to our index.js, and right outside of the body, we're going to add a script tag with an src to script.js, and we're going to add in that closing tag. I am about to stop, but what you should be testing here is if you go live, you should not only see Max's movies in red, but if you right click and inspect in the console, you should see a hello world. So that's what we're trying to get to. And we're gonna stop and create a poll. And if anyone does not have their movie title in H1 in red and their hello world in the console, go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, I'm launching the poll.
I have a question, Max.
Yep.
Can you move that?
So I've seen the script for like a JavaScript tag element be placed in like 3 different places. So I've seen it placed in the header, placed at the bottom of the body, and now I've seen you place it outside of the body. Is there any particular reason?
Yeah, so it depends. There is a reason. Basically what we're doing is when we put it in the head tag, we basically say this JavaScript has to run before anything shows up in the body. So, hey, I've got some mission critical JavaScript in here. Before the browser shows anything up, please just show run this JavaScript. If you put it either in the body or at the bottom of the body, it's going to say, hey, I'm going to load in all of my page content first. And then once I've got all my HTML figured out, then I'm going to go into my JavaScript and execute it. I actually don't know if it's preferred to be put inside the body at the bottom or put outside of the body. That is a good question that I don't have the answer to. But basically what you want to do is your head is always going to load in order. So if you want your JavaScript to run before any of your HTML gets figured out, you're going to want to put it up in the head. But if you have your JavaScript run after the HTML is loaded, which in this case is completely fine, then you can put it either at the bottom in the body or right outside the body.
Thank you.
Got about 8 people in on the poll, so I'm guessing you guys are still working on it, or a couple of you are. Feel free to raise your hand or come off mute if you have questions or stuck.
You're not sharing your code, are you?
I am now.
I just want to make sure I'm not missing any links. So the HTML is linked to the style CSS, and then the JavaScript is linked to the
Index.
is in the index. Is there? Should there be like more of them, like so they all could be with each other, or is it just naturally like that?
Nope. HTML is always going to be your connection point between your CSS and your JavaScript.
Okay.
So basically the browser loads the index and it goes through and it goes, oh, I know what a doc type is in HTML and the head. And then it gets down to here and it goes, oh, a link tag. And it goes down and it gets your CSS and starts processing that. Then it goes, oh, the body, this is all the stuff I'm going to show up, and it gets all of that. And then it gets down to the script tagging, goes, oh, fun, JavaScript, and goes and gets script.js and then starts at the top of your JavaScript and works its way all the way down there.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. All right, we got 9 votes in. I would love one more, and then we can keep on going.
What do you have in your script.js?
Just a console log hello world.
You can count me as one. I answered no before, but I'm good now.
Okay.
Are we worried about any errors that pop up in the console when we do the inspect?
If you have this failed to load resource, the server responded with a status 404 not found, you can ignore that one. What it's trying to do is load what they call a favicon, which is like the little icon that shows up here. And because we're doing the live server, it's trying to find the favicon for the server, and it can't. So if this is your only error, you are good to go and you can ignore it. If you have an error other than that, then we should be concerned.
I do. It says error handling response type error, self.process response is not a function at Chrome extension, blah, 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 blah.
Okay, so that important thing at Chrome extension means that it's not actually your code that's causing the problem. It's an extension in Chrome that's trying to read through your code and is confused.
Okay.
So that one you don't have to worry about either, because it's with the Chrome extension itself and not with your code.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we do have 10 votes in, so I'm going to keep going. I apologize in advance. It is 78 degrees and I am not used to the summer heat yet. I know it's probably not that warm in upstate, but I cannot wait to be there in 4 days. Okay, so we're going to keep going. So first things first, let's get some styling out of the way, because we want to keep on referencing my version over here, right? So we've got everything centered. We got this select a movie to show up, and we have this drop down. So let's get that working. I'm going to go to my style, and I'm going to take out my H1 color red because we don't want it to actually be red. But in here, I'm going to say the entire body, the entire page, just text align that sucker center. And then we're going to go back to my index.html. And in addition to Max's movies, I am going to add a p tag here that says, please select a movie to see available seating. I'm going to save and come over here. Okay, got my little sentence. That's looking good. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a select tag here, because the select is going to give me my drop down. And I'm going to say my option is movie 1 and my option is movie 2. And when I come over here, I can switch between the two of them. But now we've got something interesting. We've got all of those seats that we want. And those seats are dependent on what movie we have selected, right? So if you look at my version over here, you see The Godfather has these seats. And even if I switch to Shawshank and switch back to The Godfather, it remembers what seats are associated with The Godfather. So what we really need to do is have a central place for all of this data to be stored. And so the place that we're going to store that is in our script.js. So I'm going to take out my console log hello world, and I'm going to create my master array of all of my movies. Now, why do I want it to be, what data type should I be using to store all of these different movies?
I'm randomly gonna say loop because that's the only thing that sticks in my head for JavaScript.
So a loop is not a data type. It is a way that we can loop over our data, but our data types are numbers, strings, booleans, objects, and arrays.
Array,
Objects.
array.
String.
I was
Danielle,
gonna say
you have a question?
string. Oh no, I was just gonna say strings.
Okay, so the answer is kind of all of the above. It was a loaded trick question. So we need to store multiple movies, but all of the data that we're storing about the movies is going to be stored in the title of that movie, and then we're going to pull some data outside of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to store all of this in one big object, and an object is made up of key and value pairs. So the keys that we are going to use are all of the movie titles. So I'm going to say The Godfather, and in The Godfather, we're going to put an empty object because we're going to want to store some information in The Godfather. And we're going to say Finding Nemo and make that an empty object as well, because we're going to store more info in there. And then we're going to do commas after those because we are separating out these keys. And we're going to do one final one for Citizen Kane and make that an empty object as well. And we'll just work with 3 movies for now. Okay, now we need to think about, well, what data are we storing about those movies? If you look over here, I've got all of this price information. So, hey, wouldn't it be nice if my prices were stored in that movie as well? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say the price is going to be $8. This price is going to be $9. And this price is going to be $10. Now, why don't we need quotes around these values? Because those values are numbers. They are not strings. So just to make sure all of this is working, I'm going to console log out my movies. So I come over here and I look in my console, and now I see this object, and you see these dots down here at the bottom. Let me try and blow that up one. Those dots are trying to tell me that there's data inside of those objects, but it's trying to not overwhelm me with all of it. So if I open this up, I can see my object keys, and then I can see the price and the numbers with them. Okay, let's pause there. The last thing I want to do is I want to just practice getting inside my movies. So I'm going to take my movies and I'm going to say, I want to get into Finding Nemo. I want the price of Finding Nemo to come out. So because there is a space in our object key, we have to use square brackets. We can't use our object notation. So in my movies, I'm going to say, go get Finding Nemo. And now that you've got it, Finding Nemo, go get me the price of Finding Nemo. So I'm going to save. I come over to my console and I've got the price coming out there. So I'm going to stop and give you guys a chance. I know this syntax is new to you guys. So don't worry, don't panic if it's taking you a little while to type it in. What we're doing here is we're saying const movies, the equals is assigning it in. The curly brace is saying we need a new object here. Objects always have key and value pairs. The key is almost always going to be a string. And so the key here is The Godfather. We then have the semicolon, which is saying now this is no longer the key part of the object. What is coming is the value. Now, the value of object can be any data type. It can be a Boolean, it can be a number, it can be a string, it can be an array, or it can be another object itself. So in here, we create a new object, which is what the curly braces are telling us. And in that, we have a key of price and a value of 8. And then down here, we just dive into our movies. We use our bracket syntax here to get Finding Nemo. And in Finding Nemo, we pull out the price, which is 9. And that's why when we switch over to our console and look at 9, we're able to see that there.
If you click movie 1, will you see anything yet or no?
Nope, nothing going in here yet. That's what we're going to do next.
Oh.
Got 6 votes in, so I think you guys are still working on it. If you have questions, let me know.
Max, I don't have a drop down. What was that?
Yep, so in your index.html, we added this select in here with an option movie 1 and movie 2.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
How do I get it to print out the console on my web page?
Do you have the inspector open over here?
Yes.
Okay, so in your code, you should just do your console.log movies, whatever your movie title is, and then price. And make sure your script.js is not only saved, but that you have a script source tag in your index.html.
I'm sorry, Max, can you go back to your, that part? Sorry, I just wanted to see something.
No problem. Liking the way class is going so far, we had, I think, 5 or 6 people saying no, but keep going. And all of a sudden we're down to 2 people saying no, but keep going. So that's a promising sign, excuse me. Danielle, go ahead with your question.
I didn't hit submit.
Okay, do you have a live share or no?
I do. I put it in the live stream channel.
Thank you.
And I wanted to say that the clarification of like the brackets, how it's moving is perfect. Like you're
Awesome.
doing great explaining.
We're going to keep that up all night or until the coffee wears off, one of the two.
For some reason, your live stream isn't popping up on mine. Do you know why?
Anyone else having trouble getting into the live stream? Sanjay, you may want to reboot or quit VS Code and reopen VS Code and see if that gets you in.
So I'm sorry. So for the console log that we did, and we're putting Finding Nemo in that bracket, what is that for again?
This Finding Nemo here is saying that Finding Nemo here is going to dig us in a level. So here, this is the outer level, right? So it's like peeling away parts of an onion. The first outer shell of the onion is movies. So movies is here. We peel away that layer and we go into Finding Nemo. That's the second layer. So it's getting us to this point here. Now we go to a third layer, which is price, which is in here. And then we finally get to the center of the onion, which is the price of 9. So if we look in our console, we get 9, which is the center of our onion.
Okay. And so basically the Finding Nemo is the movie that we're selecting so that we can pick a seat.
Correct. We haven't done our seats yet. We're only focused on getting our movies and our prices set up right now.
Okay. Okay.
We will be layering in our seats as we go. So that brings up a good point of, hey, in our steps, we should say in JS, create movies object with titles as keys and object for values with price information. So the goal here is that you could read this sentence and with this sentence alone, go make something like this. So if at any point you're reading a sentence in here and you're like, that's not how I would describe what we just did, stop me and let me know, and we'll find a way to edit it so it does make sense. I've got 9 votes in. I would love to get 10. So we'll give everyone just 30 more. Oh, we got 10. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Okay, so we're going to keep going here. We've got our movies in here, but I'm looking over here and nope, here, and my movies don't match, right? I want to be using the data in my JavaScript to make this select populate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my index.html, and I need some hook. I need some way to say, hey, JavaScript, this is the select that I would like to target. So I'm going to put an ID on this, and I'm going to call it movie dropdown. Now be careful with your capitalization and your dashes here, because those dashes really tie everything together, right? So all I'm doing here is I'm adding my ID movie dropdown. If you're following along with me, do not miss this step, because none of your JavaScript is going to work if you don't have this in your HTML. So we're going to go back to our script.js. And what I'm going to do is below my movies object, we can take out this console log. We don't need it yet. We're going to say const movie dropdown. And what we're doing is we're creating a hole in our JavaScript to store our movie dropdown in. And we are going to say that is equal to document, the HTML document, get element by ID. And what ID did we call it? We called it movie dropdown. And then I'm going to console.log my movie dropdown. So I come over here, I refresh the page, and now I've got my lovely little select here. Well, that select is just a placeholder. It's not doing anything for us right now, but we do have it there, so we can work with it. So now what I can do is I'm going to take out my console log. And what am I trying to do here? I am trying to loop over each movie in the movies object and add it to the select dropdown in our HTML. All we are trying to do here is get these 3 movies, Godfather, Finding Nemo, and Citizen Kane, to show up here as options. So what we are going to do is we are going to say, hey, let the options equal an empty string to get started. And every time we go over the movies array, we are going to add it to that option string. But let's break that down a little bit. We're going to say for const movie of, and now we run into a problem here, because if we say movie of movies, well, for of loops only work over arrays. That's only getting every object out of an array, but this isn't an array. So how are we going to get access to just the Godfather, Finding Nemo, and Citizen Kane? Because that's all we really care about. Well, what we're going to do is we are going to say object.keys movies. But before we do that, I want to see what that is actually doing. So I'm going to comment that all out, and I'm going to do a console log object.keys movies. So object is built into JavaScript. So is that keys function. And what we're going to do is if we look in the browser here, you see we now have an array of the Godfather, Finding Nemo, and Citizen Kane. What is that doing? It's taking movies as a parameter that we're passing in to this function built into JavaScript called object.keys. It's pulling the 3 keys outside of our object and dumping them into an array for us. Well, what do we know about arrays? Well, arrays can be looped over with a for of loop. So each key is going to get dropped into this thing called movie. And it's really the movie title. So if I console log out my movie title and refresh, I get my 3 movie titles here. But looking at our HTML, we know they've got to end up in options, right? They've got to end up in option tags. So I'm going to go back to my script.js, and I'm going to say every time we get a movie title, go get the options and add to it, add to the end of it, plus equals an option. And inside of that option, we're going to add the movie title. And then we are going to close out what that option looks like. So I save it, I come over here, and magically all my code doesn't work. You missed 2 steps. First step is, well, we think all of this is working, but we don't really know, right? Because we told the computer to generate all of this, but we don't have insight into the computer into what it's actually generating. So if I come down here and I console log out my options and refresh, now I see my options shrink. And by golly, that looks like valid HTML. But it's not showing up here. What's the last step we need to do to get this HTML from our JavaScript to show up in here in our dropdown?
That inner HTML stuff.
Bingo. We're going to take this movie dropdown, which we haven't used yet, which is going in through the DOM bridge and going into our HTML and pulling that out. So we've got it in our JavaScript and we're storing that in movie dropdown. But now we need to tell, hey, movie dropdown, go look in the inner HTML, and your inner HTML is now going to equal these options that we just generated right here. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to refresh. And if you look, we've got our 3 movies in there.
I got a question, Max.
Yep.
So when we're doing the for loop, why are we saying movie titles of object.keys movies?
Yeah, so basically we can't use a for of loop unless it's an array.
Okay.
And so when we're looping over our data here, our data isn't in an array, it's in an object. And what the data we're trying to get out is the keys information, because the keys is where our movie title is actually stored. So what this object keys movies is doing is it's taking in our movies object and converting it into an array of each one of the keys.
Okay, if we wanted to just the values per se, would we just say object.values movies?
You could, and we're going to use one in the second called object.entries, which is going to give us both the key and the value. But to your point, we could console log out our object.keys and pass in our movies. And we could also console.log out the object.values movies and take a look in our console. Not only do we get our 3 keys, we also get the 3 prices.
Thank you.
So let's go back to our instructions, and we're going to say loop over each movie in the movie's object. Well, that isn't particularly accurate, right? Loop over each movie in the movie's object using keys and add the movie title to the select dropdown in our HTML as an option tag. And even though this was a couple lines of code, that's exactly what we're doing here. We're looping over each movie title, which is stored in the keys of the object of movies. Then we are having our options starting out as blank. And every time we find a new movie title, make a new option tag for it and shove in movie title. Now, why isn't movie title in quotes there? Because we want the value of movie title coming out of the key of the object. We don't want the word movie title to show up there. But we do want the word option to show up there in tags and our closing option tag. So once we finally get all of this generated, we can take our options that we just generated and shove it inside the movie dropdown select tag that is coming from our document get element by ID. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Let's take a break, all of us. If you don't have it working, that's fine. When we come back at 7:25, we will pick it up there and I will answer any questions that you guys have. But let's all take a break because a lot more to come at you guys. So take a break. See you at 7:25. Okay, everything looks okay there, so go ahead and save it. Oh, and the problem is you're not running the JavaScript in Node, you're gonna let the browser do that for you. So if you go back over to Chrome and right-click and inspect there, when you go to the console, that's going to have your JavaScript going on. So there's your options is not defined in script.js line 14. So go ahead to your script.js and 14 options is not defined because you said up at the top, let option, not options. So save that and go back to your browser and refresh. Oh, save your script.js. And now we've got another problem. Cannot set properties of null setting inner HTML. So what's going on here is it's trying to find your movie dropdown, or your movie dropdown is coming from up here. And I don't know that you have a movie dropdown.
Oh,
So save that. And now go to the browser, and I think you will find you've got some drop downs going on there.
Yes.
And you also have it working right here, which was the end goal.
So Max,
Yes.
obviously it's replacing the movie 1 and movie 2 option.
Yep.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So on the fly, it comes over there and it does what?
Yeah. So let's do a quick rundown, Wayne. I'm going to stop sharing your screen and kick mine off.
Can I take a quick guess at that? So is it like a skeleton, like an outline, and then that
The index.html kind of
Yeah.
is. Yep.
Okay.
So what's happening is browser first opens index.html. Welcome back from break, everyone, by the way. Okay, so first what happens, browser opens index.html and it starts chugging through the page, right? And it gets down here to our CSS and goes and pulls in the CSS, and we know all of that good stuff, right? Then it comes down here and it goes, okay, we want all of this stuff to show up. So when the page first loads, it's got a movie drop down with movie 1 and movie 2 in it. And if we comment out our JavaScript and look at it, our movie 1 and our movie 2 stay there. But as soon as we hit this script tag, it goes, oh, hold on, I've got some JavaScript to go run there. Here's movie 1 and movie 2 for now. I'm going to go run that JavaScript. So it comes over to our JavaScript, and our JavaScript runs, and it goes, all right, you've got an object here. I don't give a crap about the object. I'm just going to remember what data you're putting into the object. Then it comes down here and it goes, oh, movie dropdown. What should movie dropdown have in it? Oh, you want me to go to the HTML, use that document object model bridge between the JavaScript and the HTML and pull out movie dropdown. Well, where's movie dropdown? That is our ID right here. So now it knows whenever I reference movie dropdown in my JavaScript, it's going to be modifying this whole thing in here. So then we go back to our script and it goes, okay, I'll keep movie dropdown in the back of my head. What else would you like me to know about? And we say, create options. There's not going to be anything in it, but options is going to be a string. So these empty quotes here are saying, hey, this is an empty string. We're going to modify it later, which is why this is a let and not a const. Now it keeps on running, chugging along, right? Oh, console log out the keys in the movies? Sure, I'll log those 3 things out for you. Oh, you would also like the values coming out of the movies? Sure, no problem. I'll log out these 3 objects for you right here. Okay, now what would you like? Oh, you want a for loop. What are we looping over? Well, we're going to loop over the movies, but because movies is an object, we are going to loop over only the keys. So every time we find a new key in the object, we're going to shove it in movie title. Okay, now what's going to happen every time that we get a movie title? We're going to put the movie title, but we're going to sandwich it between these two option tags. And these option tags are just strings. And every time that you loop over this, add it to our thing called options. Well, what's our thing called options? It's an empty string to start, but now every time that it finds a new key in there, it's going to add that in there. So that when we get to the end of it, options is a long string that has our movie titles wrapped in our option tags. Okay, well, now that we've got all of our options figured out here, what are we going to do last? We are going to take our options, go back to the movie dropdown, which we got by the ID, and inside the inner HTML of that select, we're going to shove our options that we just generated out.
And it wipes out the other ones that were there, basically.
Correct. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the point of the night where we go, if we learn nothing else, we want to make sure we understand this code. So are there any questions, no matter how stupid of a question you think it may be? Are there any questions on this? Or is
Yes.
anyone stuck and want help to get unstuck?
I have one more.
Yep.
If we were to do, is there a plus equals with the inner HTML? So instead of wiping out the two, that would add on to the HTML that was there already?
Kind of. What we would do is instead of making this an empty string, we would say, hey, start out options with whatever is currently in the movie's dropdown inner HTML. And then as we're going through it, we're going to add onto whatever is in options, but options is going to start with the inner HTML.
Okay, thank you.
So when we refresh here, now we've got movie 1, movie 2, and the movies that we added.
Thank you.
Great question.
And just for clarification, the inner HTML is everything between the two tags?
Correct. So if we look at our HTML here, the inner HTML is going to be anything between this opening select tag and anything in this closing select tag, which is going to be our 3 options.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So what is the object keys exactly?
The object.keys is pulling out so a key, an object has 2 parts, a key and a value. The key of an object is always going to be the data type of a string. But what we ran into here is when we did this for loop, for of loops can only run over arrays. But the problem is movies isn't an array, it's an object. And we know it's an object because it's using curly braces instead of square brackets. And so we needed to find a way to loop over the object. But what were we trying to get out of the object? We were trying to get the movie titles, and the movie titles happen to be the keys in this object. So if you look at this console log here, the object.keys, we're giving it the object movies, and then this built-in function to JavaScript is converting the object, pulling out the keys and shoving it in an array. So if you look at the output in the console, here's our array of our 3 movie titles. But now that it is in square brackets, that means it must be in an array. So when we come back over here, we can do our for of loop and get each one of the movie titles out that we want.
Okay,
So
thank you.
you might have just said this, but I wasn't sure. So how do you know it's an object?
You know it's an object because there are curly braces right here.
Okay.
And you know it's an array because it's a square bracket right here.
Okay, thank you.
Don't ask me why it's curly braces, but square brackets. That's the way I was taught it, and I don't know any other way. I don't know why they aren't all called brackets or braces or whatever.
Is there a reason that you made the list of movies an object as opposed to an array of objects?
We could have. As we go on, what we are going to do is reference something called seats inside of our movies object, and that is going to depend on what movie is selected. So you're going to see a little bit later on why I made it an object, because what we're going to want to do is get out the seats for whatever movie is selected.
Okay,
And it will be easier to access that data in an object than it will be in an array. However, that is not to say it wouldn't work as an array. I could totally rewrite this code and just have an array, and instead of storing whatever movie was selected, we would store whatever index was selected instead. And that is totally doable and fine. This is just giving us a little bit more practice with objects, because we're going to have enough practice with arrays for the seats.
okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Chrissy.
I need to know what I did wrong because my movies didn't come over.
Go for it.
Share site, share my screen. Here we go. So here's my code. And I got my index HTML. I just checked it.
Style, script, movie 1, movie 2, ID, movie drop down. I don't see anything wrong there. Go to your JavaScript. That all looks good. Keys, values, option, movie title, movie drop down, options. Okay, show me your JavaScript.
This one?
I'm sorry, show me it in Chrome in the browser.
Okay, I'm not trying to get it over.
Okay, right click, inspect, and console. And we've got an error, document.getElements by ID. Are we getting multiple elements or are we getting an element?
Oh, so just that simple S.
Mm-hmm.
Oh goodness.
And knowing where to look for the error, which is sometimes half the battle, right? Because now we've got errors in a lot of different places. It could be in our HTML, it could be in our JavaScript, it could even be in our CSS. So knowing where to look is important. So save that sucker, go back to your browser, refresh. Okay, now we got a different error. Movie title is not defined. So let's go back to your code. And here you're saying movie title, but you've got just movie up here.
Console so it should be movies.
Well, no. The movie title.
Like for movies.
No, look, right here you've got movie title, but what you're pulling out of the array is just the movie. So you can either make this one say movie or make this one say movie title.
Oh, up here.
Yep. And you're good to go.
Oh my God. This is letters, little letters. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we keep going here? Okay, so you guys are going to love this because we're going to take everything we just did and modify it. So I've got another problem here of when we look at my movies, I've got my name, but I also got that lovely little price showing next to it. So how are we going to do that? Well, if we come over here and we look in our script.js, we've got the price information. But when we're looping through this data, we only have access to the movie title because we're getting the keys. Well, we don't want the keys, just the keys. We also want the values, but I can't call it keys and values. That doesn't exist. What does exist is if we console.log our object.entries of our movies, let's see what that gives us. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to pop over to my console, and it's going to tell me that entires, it doesn't exist, but entries should. So I'm going to refresh, and now we get this weird thing. It says array of 2, If I open it up, it says The Godfather, and it has the price in it as another thing. Well, that's like a weird data structure, but wouldn't it be nice if we could get access to both of them? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out because we're not going to use this version, but I'm going to copy it and paste it. And instead of saying object.keys, I'm going to say .entries. But now remember, there were two things coming out of that. It wasn't just the movie title, it was also the movie itself. So if I take the movie itself and I come down here and I console log, excuse me, I have something in my eye. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Let's try this again. I'm going to console log out the movie title and the movie itself, and let's see what that gives me. Well, over here, I've got the titles coming out and my drop down is still working. But look, now I've got access to this object. And because that object is in curly braces, that means it is an object. It's not buried in an array. So I've got access to this movie, and this movie has the price, and the price is just a number. So that's actually pretty cool because I can come in here and I can say, in addition to the movie, I want you to show up as an open parenthesis and a $sign, and then take the movie itself and go look at the price of the movie. And once you're done pulling in the price of the movie, add in the closing parenthesis. So now we're pulling things together here. Entries is what's breaking this data apart. So I've got access to the key, the movie title, but I also have access to this movie, this object up here. And from that object, I can go grab the price out of it and make this monstrosity of a string where I've got the option, the movie title, this parenthesis and the $sign, the price coming out of the movie, which is coming from this whole object up here, the closing parenthesis and the closing option tag. So if I come back to my browser and I refresh, it does nothing because I probably forgot to save. Now I've got my price showing up, and if I select it, now I have my 3 prices showing up. And the last thing, all I need to do is add a little space there. And now we have everything showing up the way it is. So I know that wasn't a lot, but there's a lot of technical things that we just changed in there. So I'm going to just relaunch the poll and make sure that we're doing all right here. Would another explanation help? Another pass through it? Okay. So a lot going on here, right? What we're doing is this is what we were doing before, right? We wanted just the keys. We wanted The Godfather, Finding Nemo, and Citizen Kane. So when we did object.keys, the key popped into movie title. But now we run into something interesting where we still want the key, but we also want the value of the key. We want the price 9, the price 10, the whatever it is. So we have access to our keys and we have access to our values. But if we want access to both of them, we use this thing called object.entries. And what .entries is going to do is it's going to give us not only the key, but the value of the key. And so when we use .entries, because it's returning 2 things, we put it in an array. And those 2 things it's returning is the movie title, which is the key, And then this object is going in for the value, which we're calling movie. So maybe it might make more sense. Let's do it like this. Key value, key value, key value. Doesn't matter what we call it here, as long as we're consistent with using it in here. So when we do this for loop, it's going to run 3 times because there are 3 values in the object. So if we come over to our Chrome and look, we've got our key coming out and the value of that key, which is an object of price 8. We've got a key called Finding Nemo and the object of price 9. So that for loop is running 3 times, and each time it logs, it's breaking apart the object and putting the key here, which is the name of the movie, and then the value is whatever is on the other side of the parenthesis. So what we're doing here is we're taking all of that data and now putting it together. We know we need an option because it's HTML. The key, well, this is the movie title. So this is dropping in the words The Godfather. Now it's adding in another string with our parenthesis and our $sign, just so we've got some nice formatting. And now it's saying value. Well, every time this runs, we're going to get this whole object, but we don't actually want the object. What we want is the price out of the object. So we're going to say value, and that dot is going to say, look inside this entire object for the key of price. And that price is going to drop in here, and that's going to be 8. And then we're just going to finish off the string with a closing parenthesis and our closing option tag. And then once it does all of that information, we are then going to go to the inner HTML, shove in that HTML we just generated, and make sure it's going inside our movie dropdown. So show you again, your end result should be your dropdown with your 3 movies and your 3 prices. Don't have many votes in the poll, so I'm guessing you guys are still working on it or letting it sink in, which is also completely fine. So we'll give you guys a couple minutes.
All right, so we're going through, we're getting the key, which would be the movie name.
Yep.
And then we're getting the value, which would be the price.
Yep.
And the reason we're saying when we're printing it out and when we're, concatenating to objects, we're saying value dot price, so it only shows the actual value and not price :8.
Yes.
Okay.
Because actually, if we just put value in here and we go back to the browser, it's going to say, oh, The Godfather, that's a string. I know how to do that. And there's some object here. I don't know how you want me to display an entire object. So I'm just going to say object and put it in there.
So when it refers to the object, it's referring to the.
So the value is this object right here that I have highlighted.
Oh, okay.
And so when we say, no, we don't want you to actually print out object. We want you to look at value, which is an object. And within that object, go get price as the key. So it goes value. Okay, that's this whole object. But because you gave me a key, I'm now going to pull another layer of the onion back and look at the key of price. And whatever is in that price, we're now going to pull that layer of the onion back and get out the value in price. And that number 8 is going to go in this whole part here.
Okay. So movie itself is one big object.
Movies is one big object. Yes.
And then we have the key, and then the value of that each entry basically
is another object.
Is there any reason why we did that?
Yeah. So what we could have done is we could have, let's back this out. We could have said 8, 9, and 10, and then just said value here. And this would have accomplished the same exact thing. If I refresh, here's my 8, 9, and 10. But the problem is now where am I going to store my seats data?
Okay, so more information is coming, that's why. All
More
right.
information is coming, which is why we complicated that structure a little bit, because we're also going to generate out all of our seats data.
Okay, so value just saying, hey, I'm this new object that's inside the object you already had, and now you have to go get specific about what part of this object you want.
Exactly. Nail on the head.
Hey Max, is it possible I can share my screen? I'm getting error codes.
Yep,
I'm
go
not
for
sure
it.
why.
Okay, so you
Oh.
have object.entries is not a function.
Okay. I'm sorry. So this one right here on line 18.
18. Yep.
That's all on my way. Sorry. Oh, well. Okay.
It's fine. I only spelled it wrong 3 times when I was trying to type it myself. So give that a save. Yep.
Sorry,
And,
guys. Nope, wrong.
and there you go.
Okay.
Rocking and rolling.
Oh, thank you.
Can you do me real quick?
Yep, go for it. Show me your error in the browser.
Oh, you can't see that. 1 second.
Right click, inspect.
1 second.
Yep.
It's on the other screen. I just pulled one tab off.
Okay, so we've got object is not defined on line 10. So your object, because it's coming from JavaScript, it has to be a capital O.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. O. And save that. And then the other problem is in my example, I changed this key and value.
Oh, hold on, I can't see you. Or like if you're showing anything.
Oh, I just drew it on your screen. So key right here
Oh, okay.
and value. But if you're going to change them there, you also have to change this movie title to key and this movie to value.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And I think once you get those swapped, everything will go back to working again.
Thank you.
So I've got 8 votes in. I think 10 was our threshold. I would love to get us there. Make me feel a little bit better that I haven't lost you guys, but
I voted no, keep going, but I'm good now.
good.
And you said it was value, it was key then value or value then key?
Key and then value.
All right, got it.
Which is the same order it would come in an object, right? You put the key first and then you put the value. So when you're looping over it, it makes sense to get the key first and then the value. Although it is JavaScript, I wouldn't put it past them to screw with you and flip those two.
Okay, thank you.
All right, last chance for questions before we keep going, or someone shouts, just give me 1 more minute. Okay, we're gonna keep going then. So I'm gonna reshare my screen before I forget. So we're at this point now where we've got our drop down working great. Let's go back to our steps and make sure we've got everything. Loop over each movie in the movie's object using keys and add the movie title to the select dropdown in our HTML as an option tag. Believe it or not, we've been stuck on this one and we haven't done anything else, but we need to modify this one a little bit because this step doesn't include our prices, right? So we're going to modify this because we're thinking like, hey, if I had to make this again from scratch, am I documenting these steps so that if I were to redo this project tomorrow, I would remember what I had to do? So in this, we're going to say loop over each movie in the movie's object using keys and values from object.entries. We are going to add the movie title and price to the select dropdown in our HTML as an option tag. Now, all of that may sound really wordy, but if you were a developer looking at this code for the first time, how would you describe what this is doing? Well, exactly what we just said. We're using object.entries on the movies object to get out the key and the value, and then we're generating a new option that's going to go into our select tag up here, and that is using the key and the value to generate out the new option, and then it's setting it down here. Karen, I'm going to take a breath there. Do you want to share what you have been commenting?
Give me a second because I have an error here that I'm just looking to fix. And I think it's just some quotes.
Okay. So Karen has been doing the things that we're documenting in the steps. I think I have two windows here and shouldn't. The things that we're documenting here, Karen is leaving as inline notes, and she'll share that with you. But we have found some of our most successful students, even though they're keeping up in class, they'll go through their own code and line by line say, you know, write a comment right here that says, you know, stores the movie titles and their prices in an object, right? And then they'll say, gets the select from the HTML using an ID, right? And then they'll come down here and says, placeholder for the new options we are about to generate, or whatever it is. Just going through at the end of the night, even though it's not homework, even though you're not going to get any bonus points for it, go through and add those notes in, because it doesn't matter if the code is working or not. If you don't understand what the code is doing, it doesn't do you any good. And so getting into that level is going to reinforce that and let those concepts start to sink in. So I'm going to keep going here. We now come over here and we've got this movie seats going on, right? These movie seats show up so that when I pick an option, it shows me the different seats going on there. So we need to get all of those seats working. So we're going to do our favorite, which is not Free Code Camp changing everything on us, but Google Material Icon changing everything on us. So I'm going to do a Google search for Google Material Icons. And I'm going to take the first one that pops up, and I'm not going to fall for the trap. I'm going to go into the search here, and I'm going to search for seat. And you can use this chair alt if you want. You could use anything that pops up, but I'm going to use their first chair. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to avoid this entire top part with the variable icon font and come down to the static icon font. That's the one that I want. So I'm going to copy this one. Again, ignore the first two code blocks. We want this static icon font down here, and that's what we're going to copy. Now I have a lovely, okay, the car alarm's done. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my code. Don't fall for the trap. This is not going in our JavaScript. This is going in our index.html. Where do link tags go? They go up in the top of the head section. And again, what that code is doing is it's saying, hey, I'm about to use some icons. Browser, you got to pull the icon in before I can make it show up. Then I'm going to come back over here. We don't have anything to test yet. So it says inserting the icon. I'm going to copy that code snippet. Christy, I'm about to pause in 1 second. I'm going to come back over here, and it's not going in my movie dropdown, but I am about to have a bunch of seats. So I'm going to create an ID here called seats, and then I'm going to paste in my chair. I'm going to come back over. I'm going to look at my code, and I've got my one little chair working there. And in fact, I would like more of those chairs working there. So I'm going to paste it again. No, I got 2 seats, and my rows have 8 chairs in them. So I'm just going to copy and paste 8 times. And I've got my 8 chairs. So I'm going to stop there and make sure everyone's following, because devil is in the details on those font icons. But before I stop sharing my screen, again, I did a search for Google material icons. I clicked on icons here. I did a search for chair. I picked the chair by clicking on it. I came over here. I ignored the first two code blocks. I came down to this static icon font. I copied this here. I came back to my code over here in the index.html, not in my script.js. I pasted in the style sheet. I then went back to Google. I copied this, inserting the icon section, and hit copy here. I went back to VS Code and I created a new div ID seats, and I pasted that span tag in 8 times. And the end output should be our seat showing up. Seven votes in, 8 votes in, like one more before we keep going. If anyone has questions or is stuck anywhere, let me know. All right, we got 9 votes in. We good? Or do we need one more minute?
Another minute.
Okay. Oh, we got 10 votes in. Suddenly picked up more students in class, I guess.
Hmm.
All right, talk to me if you're lost. Can I help you get unstuck?
It's just that trying to get to the material icon, so that I got stuck there, and then I just couldn't catch up. But I'm just trying to get the seats in here before you go on. Okay. I think I'm safe. I think it's safe to go.
Okay. So we've got our seats in here, but I think we're jumping the gun a little bit, because what data do we need to save about the seats? If you look at this, what data do you notice needs to probably be saved about these seats?
How many is in the whole place? So like
How many's
what's the
in the whole
layout?
place? Yep, that's one. And then what about each individual seat? What needs to be stored about each individual seat?
Whether it's
Is
available.
it available or not?
Yep, but if you look at my screen, it's not just whether it's available or not, it's also whether it is
The 2-seater?
selected or not.
Oh, yeah, selected.
Okay, but if you look at this, this almost looks like a grid to me, right? So what we need to do is, before we can do anything of our seats and getting our seats into our HTML, we've got to get our seats in our JavaScript first, because all of the data on the seats is living in JavaScript, and based off of the JavaScript data, then we can get it going in our HTML. So we need to generate out these seats in our movies before we can make them show up in our HTML. So we're going to go back to our steps. We're going to say add Google fonts for material icons and make row of seats show up. But after we do that, we need to generate the seats for each movie in our JavaScript data. So let's go through there. We're going to go back to our JavaScript, and because all of this code logically lumps together, we're going to make a new function for this. So we're going to say const generate seats is going to equal a new function. And to get started, it's not going to take any parameters. So we've seen our const equals. This empty parentheses is just telling the code, hey, there's a function coming your way. It's going to be a new function. And then this arrow function is telling it, or this arrow is telling it, hey, whenever we call generate seats, anything between this curly brace and this curly brace is going to be run. So let's start at the top and work our way down. Each one of these movies needs to have seats generated for it. So we're going to say, hey, at the beginning, we're going to add some new data here, and seats is going to be an empty array. We'll worry about filling it in a second. So for each one of these, I'm going to add a new empty array. So the key is going to be seats, just like the key was price, but the value, instead of being a number, is now going to be an empty array. And the way we get that empty array is using those square brackets.
Max, question.
Yep.
The reason we don't have to put quotations around price or seats is key values because they're single words.
Yes, if there is a space in it, we have to use quotes. If there is not a space in it, you can put quotes here, but they are totally optional.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we've got our seats there. Now we need to say, hey, when we generate the seats, go over and get each one of the movies, but we only care about the values at this point. We don't care about the keys. So we're going to say, go get the movie from the value of movies. Now that's a lot, and I don't know if that's going to really work or not, or give me the data that I want. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to add a console log to my movie. And I just want to see what's coming out of object.values. What's in this movie that I'm going to get access to by looping over all of this stuff. So I come back to my browser, come over here, I refresh, and I've got script 15, 20, and 22. So I come over and I look, here's my 15 lines. I'm going to comment that out. And I've got one on 22. Well, I don't want that to console log anymore. But hey, where's my console log on 30? I save, I come back over. There's nothing in here. There are no errors. It's not broken. I see my data in here. My JavaScript's got to be running. Why are we not getting a console log here?
You're not calling the function?
I'm not calling the function. We had generate seats, and when we said const generate seats equals a new function, JavaScript was like, great, when you tell me to generate the seats, I know exactly what to do. And then it hit the end of the file and it said, oh, I guess you never wanted me to generate the seats. I'm never going to run that code. So in order to get our function to run, we have to tell it down here at the bottom, hey, go generate the seats. And when we put in those empty parentheses, it now understands this whole line of code is going to come up to the generate seats here, and it's going to execute all of my code in this function. So I'm going to save, I'm going to come back over, and now I've got my price and my seats as an object. Well, that's good. That means I can start generating out the seats that I want. So, yeah.
What's we have to do, because I want to use it, the terminal inside of my code. It's node that what? Or
you cannot run this in Node because we are working with HTML. So Node cannot execute it. It has to be executed in your browser.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Okay, so we're in here and we've got each movie. But now let's think about, for each movie, what do we need to do to generate out the seats? What did we say the seats were over here? What does this look like to you?
Available and unavailable or selected?
Those
not
are each
looking.
individual seat, but we're not down at each individual seat level yet. What did we say all of these seats look like? What
Grid?
a grid. Now, when you think of a grid, what are the two things that you think of in a grid?
Rows and columns?
Rows and columns. Ooh, man. And if I think about rows and columns, I think about more for loops. Aren't they fun? Let's get nesting in our for loop. So we could individually code this out and we could say, hey, there are 8 rows. So go create 8 rows. And then for each one of those 8 rows, we could go into each one of them and say there are 8 columns of seats. But that would be at least 64 lines of code. Instead, we can get creative here and we can say for, and how many rows do we want? We're going to say let num rows equal 0 because we're going to start at 0. And we are going to keep going while num rows is under 8 because I want there to be 8 rows of seats. And every time that we go through this loop, add 1 to num rows. And just to see if this is working, I'm going to console log out my num rows. So I come back over to the browser and I look at my console, and my console has 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, that looks good. But if I scroll up a little more, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 again. And if we go up even more, it's got it a third time. Wait, 3 times. 3 sounds familiar. Oh, that's because we have 3 movies. So this inner loop is running 3 times because it's in this for loop. And this inner part of the inner for loop is running 8 times because we just told it run 8 times. So this console log num rows is actually running a total of 24 times because we've got 3 movies and we're telling it to run 8 times for each one of those 3 movies. But we aren't done the for loop inception yet because we just did our rows. Now we've got to do our columns. So we're going to come inside of here. And for our columns, we're going to say for let num cols equal 0. And just to be confusing, we have 8 columns in our grid as well. And what we need to do is we need to make sure every time we go through the for loop that we are adding 1 to the number of columns. So we can console log out here not only the num rows, but also the num cols. So I'm going to come back over here. And what I'm going to see, woohoo, there's a lot of output here. But you know what? It almost looks like these are coordinates. This is row 2, column 0. This is row 2, column 1. And if we scroll down here, we get to row 4, column 0. Row 4, column 1. Well, wouldn't it be cool if we were doing all of that in an array? So if we almost said every time we go through a new row, let there be a row array. It's going to start off as blank, but every time that we get through a row, we are going to add into that row a new object. And that object is going to keep track of 2 pieces of information, whether it's occupied and whether it's selected. And this is going to be the data that we have on each seat. But now, once we are done with the row and have generated out each seat in the column, we're going to come outside of our column loop because we're done generating the row. And in the movie that we are looping over all the way in the outer for loop, we are going to get the seats in that and make the seats add in the row that we just finished generating. Don't worry, this is the last thing we're going to cover tonight. And I'm going to explain that at least 2 more times. But at the end of all of this generate seats, I am going to console log out all of my movies. I'm stopping here. I'm going to re-explain all of this, but I just want to show you what the output is here. If I refresh here, my number of seats isn't right yet, but we'll take care of the HTML in a minute. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to pop open my movies array. And in my movies, I got my 3 movies, but let's just look at the first movie. I've got my price. Now I've got my seats. Well, if I look in my seats, I've got a bunch of arrays inside of there. And if I open those up, oh, whoa, console, that looks like a grid to me. I almost could use that for my HTML. But let's go inside one of those arrays, and that array has all the occupied and selected information in it. So now, again, it's an onion. My movies is here. I peel back a layer and I get access to one movie. Inside that movie, I've got another object with my price and my seats. My seats are a big array, and in that array, there are more arrays. And in that final level, right, because each one of these arrays is a row, but if I pop open one of those, I'm going to see all of the objects, which are the individual seats or the columns, and that has my occupied and my selected in it. Okay, so let me do one final explanation of this, and then we're calling it a night. The good news is absolutely 0 homework for you tonight. If you were caught up to this point, you've got no homework to do.
Thank God.
Except for you, Nicole. I'll find an assignment for you. Totally joking. Okay, let's read through this code one more time. So because we're doing some code that's logically grouped together, we create a function called generate seats. This function is taking no parameters, but we know it's a function because it's using this equal arrow, which we call an arrow function. And anything between these 2 curly braces is what's going to run whenever we call generate seats. So when we say we're calling a function, we're telling the computer, hey, go execute this code inside of the function. And we tell it to execute by putting the parentheses after the name of it. We then dive into this function and we have 3 for loops going on in here. They're called nested for loops because it's like a Russian doll. You pull out one of the for loops and inside that for loop is another for loop. And we know it's inside the for loop because it's indented another level and because it's between the opening and closing curly braces. So we have 3 things we need to loop over here. We need to say for each movie, we need to generate out rows of seats, which is our second for loop. But when we generate out the rows, we also have to generate a seat for each column. So what we do is we say, hey, go through each movie and go get the value of the movies because we want to be working in these seats. We don't care what the title of the movie is. What we're doing is every time we go through a movie, go get the value, which is this entire object here, and take that entire object and shove it into this variable called movie. Okay, now what do we want to do for each one of those movies? We want to go through and run a for loop. Go ahead, Christy. Okay, so what we want to do is for each movie, how many times do we want to generate out rows? We just picked 8. Our movie theater is going to have 64 seats in it for whatever reason. So we say, hey, every time you go through this loop, you're going to start at 0 and you're going to add 1 every time you finish running through this loop until the number of times you've run the loop is less than 8. Okay, now what would you like to do each time you get a new row? Well, we have to have a placeholder for the row to store all of the information. So we create an empty array when we start generating out the rows. But in here, we need to store are columns. So not only do we need to run this 8 times to generate out each row, we also need to run this 8 times to generate out each column because we need 64 seats total. So we do this similar for loop, but we call it numcols instead. And then finally, when we get into the column, we need to generate out the seat itself. And we've already identified that the seat needs to keep track of 2 pieces of information, whether it's occupied and whether it's selected. So because we're storing 2 pieces of information about the same seat, we're going to put that in an object. And that object is going to get pushed into the array that we just created right here.
Max.
Yes.
So right now, we're at the point of creating an object that just has the value occupied false and selected false.
Correct.
And then we're pushing that value into the seats value.
Into the row of the seats.
Right, so we're pushing into the row first in the for loop.
And then once we are done generating out all of the columns, we are then going to take the row and push it into the seats in the movie.
Okay, thank you.
And then once we finally get that done for each row and each column of all the movies, which is down in this and for loop, then we can console log out our movies and take a look at all the seats that got generated. Would someone like me to explain another part of that? Because I don't know that I have it in me to explain the whole thing again. It may be a lot. I said there was no homework. I will say there's no homework assignment. However, this code is super important to understand. So understanding that this for loop is going to run a shitload of times. There is no, this is going to run lots of times because this is running for every column or every seat that's going to show up. This is going to run every time we need a new row going down. And this is going to run 3 times because we have 3 movies that we need to generate all of the seats out for. So Karen is going to share a code snippet with all of this code, but all commented out. I would suggest that you guys for homework, read that over tonight. There's no assignment. I'm not going to hold you to it if you don't, but make sure you understand what every single line in this code is doing. It doesn't get any more complicated from here, but we've got a lot of features to add to make all of this work. So that's where we're going to pick it up tomorrow. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. The code snippet with all the comments is coming in a second. And then I can answer any questions if you guys are stuck. Hopefully I didn't have the whole class paced well and then lose you in the last 10 minutes. But hopefully you can replay the video in the last 10 minutes and everything will be okay.
Question, Max. Should I have an error on my line 30? Well, it's my line 38, and that's where it is saying, that's like the last bit of the code. The generate the seat. Should there be an error message there or no?
There should not. Go ahead and share your screen. Let's take a look.
Okay, let me. All right.
Okay, so unexpected end of input, script 38 tells me that you've got an opening curly brace, but not a closing curly brace. That's my guess. So let's look at your code. And you've got a, let's see. You've got opening and closing. You've got an opening and a closing. You've got an opening and a closing. And you've got an opening and a closing.
Max, that bottom one goes up to her for the object of entries.
And then you've got an opening and no closing. Thank you, Karen. So try and throw a extra closing curly brace on line 36. And save that. And now you've got generate seats is not defined. So I bet you that is going to be a simple, you are missing a whole thing called generate seats. So what you want to do, I'm just going to request remote control, is that whole for loop that we did here is supposed to be, oh, wait. Your const generate seats, you did inside of this for loop. This for loop is what's generating the options. And this code is here, but this whole generate seats is supposed to be out here.
Oh.
And so now when we come over and refresh, not only do you have no errors and everything coming out, but we can open this up and open your seats. And by God, you have an array of arrays. You've got a grid. You're caught up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I go next?
Yep.
I have, 1 second, let me show you.
If you guys are done, by the way, you can head out. That's completely fine.
See that? This is what I have, chair. And
Okay.
then this is my code. Oh, wait, let's go in and inspect it. Let me see what it says.
Cannot
24
access
and 40.
movies. Okay, so let's fix your chair. Go to your index.html for me. And
It didn't look like that just 2 seconds ago. I swear to God. Prettier. You know what? I'm gonna leave it.
so what's going on with, scroll up to the top. What's going on with your style sheet? Scroll over there for me. Well, you got it all right. Save that. And go back to your browser and refresh. Where are your chairs? Go back to here. Let me just
I can exit out of yours and move it out the way.
yeah, and then I'm gonna request remote access. I think something is wrong with this is the only thing I can think of, is this static font. I'm gonna copy it and paste it back in. And then I'm gonna come back here. Okay.
Don't bite.
Copy. Come back over here.
Have a good day.
Is it double?
Paste and save. There you go. So there's
okay.
So I would just clear all of these out and then just paste
And I'll get one ready.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So I need the patient's last name, the MRN diagnosis,
And you're good to go. Okay, so now let's fix your cannot access movies before initialization. I can talk. Line 24. We are accessing movies and we're pulling the movies, but when we go through each one of them, we get access to each individual movie. So it's plural here because this is what we're looping through. But as we get each individual one, we get the movie itself. And so that's what we want to do here as well. And then we don't want to console log out the movies each time the loop runs. We want to do the movies all at the end.
Oh, okay.
And so now when we come over the other way,
Mhm.
now we not only have our objects, but we've got our seats. And if we open the seats, you've got your array.
All right. Thank you
You
so
are
much.
good to go. Good work.
Oh,
I think for me now, like I understand how JavaScript, well, this part of JavaScript works. It's just it still looks overwhelming to look at and read. But if you take your time, you can understand it.
I have
Yep.
a-
And adding your own comments. Karen, I think, is about to share the comments that she has added up that will be posted tonight. But it is good, even if you have Karen's comments, to go in and add your own comments, right? This is clearly, I know how to do this stuff. This is not for my own sake. This is for you guys to make sure you understand it. And nothing tomorrow is going to make sense unless we have understanding of this one. So I'm going to open class up tomorrow and say, where are we at? What needs to be re-explained? What do we need another example of? Because I can come up with on the fly another example of how we do a for loop in a for loop, right? So if you guys are like, I've stared at this code, I still don't get it, I can come up with another example for you that hopefully will help.
I have a,
I'll be able to make my own comment, but
Can
it
I
will
share my
help
screen real quick?
comments that she's putting in to help me reference mine or reference my code when doing so. So that's why I was a little wondering where it was.
Yep. Yeah, Karen hasn't posted it yet. I'm actually
So
just
I saw that,
reviewing
but I
it.
was just responding to what you were saying. Like, I get, looking at her code, I know for sure I would have to change my comments. I just want to see how she's going to comment it out and
Can I share my screen?
what's helpful for her.
Sure.
Go ahead, Wayne. Sorry, I was talking. My bad.
I was making sure you finish first. Okay. So I have a issue on line 60 and I'm trying to figure out why.
Yep. So you've got movie title, and that's line 16. Oh, you've got a semicolon at the end of 14. And then move your curly brace from 15 up to that line. And save. And now you've got a different error. Key is not defined. And that key should say movie title.
Oh, yeah.
And then the value should say movie.
Or vice versa, like how we did in class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, hold on. a minute.
Either way is fine. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Movie.price, not value.movie. And last thing you need to change, line 14, it should be object.entries, not object.keys. Keys was the first one that we used when all we cared about was the title, but we have to use entries because we want both the key and the value, not just the key. And you are good to go. You've got some work to do on your seats array not working because you've got movie.seats comma push on 28 instead of dot push.
And Max, each key can only have one value, even though that value may be a collection of things.
Yes. Hold on. It's starting to pour rain. I just have to close the window. Give me one. Okay, now let me answer that question because it was a good one. Oh, I've gone transparent. Come on, camera. I'm here. I swear. There we go. All right. Every object has keys and values. Keys must be strings. The values, there may only be one value for each key. However, if you would want to store multiple pieces of information about that key, you could either use an object or an array. And in that array, which would be the whole value, that array could store multiple pieces of information. So The Godfather is a good example. We wanted to store 2 pieces of information about that. One thing we wanted to store was the price, and the other one was the seats. But the price was just going to be a number. So we know we needed an object because there were 2 pieces of information. But for the seats, there was a whole bunch of things we needed to store in there. So that's why we made that an array.
In the mind of the computer, though, even though we're storing the price and the seats, for Godfather, it sees it as being one.
It sees object.
One object, okay.
Yep. Yes, and that is the onion, right? When I say movies, it sees an object. And when I say movies Godfather, it peels back a layer of the onion and goes, well, I see now another object. And you say movies Godfather price, and it goes, oh, here's a number, no problem. Or I could say movies Godfather seats, and it goes, well, that's an array. And I could say, okay, well, I want the second row. Okay, well, now there are columns in there. Well, I want the third column. Oh, you get down all the way down there, it's not occupied and it's not selected.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
So I'm just looking at the console, and it says like seats and array, and then like the 0-1, but it has like.
So how will that can you hear me? My speaker died.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, are we gonna be putting in up like how, like if they click, how will they go about like making those like look like they're selected?
Come back tomorrow for more. Oh, your volume dropped out there.
All right, good night.
Any last questions for this evening?
Nope, it was just a good night.
Okay.
I literally, as you said, good night. I just got it. I just like finished. I've been typing code this whole time, y'all. I got it.
Awesome. Good work keeping up.
Have a good night.
Wayne, I'm going to stop your screen share. Everything is working in the way it should. You are totally caught up with us.
I had a question before you hang up, Max.
Sure, go for it.
For the one-on-ones, you go on calendar.